Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Business Spotlight. I am honored today to do an interview with Annemiek van Helsdingen. Welcome, Annemiek. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much, Sue, and thank you for putting in so much effort to getting the name right. That's so appreciated. I know it's not
Oh,
an easy one.
it just looks very, like once you break it down, it's not so bad. But when you're looking at it from like a top level view, it's easy to mess up, I think.
It's definitely not English. Yes.
Definitely not. But English is a conglomerate of all of the other ones. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you have this magic in boundaries. Tell me a little bit about your work, first of all. Like, who are you and what do you do and why are you here talking to us today?
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, Susu. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Annemiek. I'm many things, but what I do in life and work-wise is that I'm the founder of the Academy for Soul-Based Coaching. And that means that we run a worldwide online coach training that has touched thousands of people worldwide by now. And we teach them a very specific modality of coaching, which is super exciting. And it is filled with magic as well as very grounded and very solid in the methodology that we teach. So that would be it in a nutshell. But of course, I can talk about this for days.
Oh, I can imagine because it's such a fascinating world of, kind of getting into helping people shift their lives and helping people facilitate those shifts is powerful
Mm.
as well. So, um,
Absolutely. Yeah. And when the reason why I'm glad that we get to talk about this is that when we look at coaching as a profession and where it came from, it really comes from, athletics, first of all, like, and then business coaching, so executive coaching. That's kind of where the birthplace of life coaching is. And it comes from this paradigm of how can we extract as much value from this person as possible. It's like, how can we use, whatever techniques can we think of that are going to make this person achieve their goals, or whose goals are they anyway, but hey. And so it's very much rooted in that more masculine based paradigm, and I'm not talking gender here, but I'm talking about that paradigm that is like this beautiful mix of capitalism, colonialism, white supremacy, like all of that, all based on hierarchy. And it's about control over, it's about how can we make life dance to our tune, rather than how can we help people co-create with life, and how can we help them really tune into their own resources and to this innate capacity that everyone has for healing, for growth, for transformation. And this is what soul-based coaching is all about. It's about teaching our coaches to become midwives for that transformation that is waiting to happen. Because the fact that if someone comes to you with like a question or like a longing or a desire to make a shift, it means that there is an impulse inside of them that is ready to be brought into action, into their everyday life. And so that is where our focus is in soul-based coaching.
I love that because it sometimes isn't about like all of that assertive dominance. Um,
Mm.
it's more about opening space and really kind of, and you said something really on point. Whose goals are they anyway? A lot of
Mm.
times we are taking society's goals or our parents' goals and acting as if those are our own goals. But when somebody like you or a soul-led coach or a soul-based coach comes in, they're going to really explore the truth and the subtle nuance of what a person is striving for or wants to achieve or what they even consider valuable, which might be totally different from what societal norms have told us is valuable before.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really love about this work is, in a way, it's like life coaching meeting shamanic journeying. It is
Mm.
that we have very powerful and potent ways in which all of these layers of a client's mind, body, and soul can be part of this conversation. And it's not just the mind that is having that conversation. And right now, I'm wondering, I can't see you anymore, Sue. Are you still here?
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
just
cool.
on you. I didn't mean to throw you off.
No, that's good. That's good. So yes, that's and this is where, so often when we do coaching, the entry point is the mind. So it's like the analysis of like what's going on, like what is it that you want, why isn't it here yet, what have you tried before, what's been blocking you, like what needs to be fixed or solved for you to have that thing that you want. But there is like a treasure trove of resourcefulness and information in people's bodies, through their souls, in the ways of their emotional expressions, that all has a part to play, if you really want to empower people. I was like, God, I can't believe I just said that, because I this is one of my pet peeves, because we cannot empower people. It is that so often we put things in the way of people being able to stay with their own power. So if you really want to help people be the most powerful that they can be, you want to make sure that as a coach, you are out of the way. Yeah.
That's a really great point because it is teaching people um, how to stand in their own power without needing somebody else's input, advice, or guidance to lead them in the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the word teaching is interesting in that respect. When it comes to teaching someone to stand in their power, it's actually more of a remembering, I find. Because standing in your power is something that we all do in our own unique ways. And so helping people remember what that is like for them, that is like the fastest way to strike gold for them. Yeah.
Right, right. Now, with your like, how did you come across the soul-based coaching? Like, what in your life led you to not only coaching, because a lot of us, it's just a natural progression of wanting to claim our own power or realizing that we're not living our lives to, their fullest capacity. But what was your story in this?
Mm, I love that question. Because I think, I was one of those kids who was always kind of looking at the world around her going like, why are people doing these things that are not making them happy, or it's like it's not making sense to what they say that they want. So I was puzzled. I was like super sensitive, empathic, like all of these things. I was picking up on so many things, and it did not add up. So I was just curious, and I just wanted to find out more. So this brought me on a path which, it led me to go to university and do like business management and like industrial engineering and all sorts of things, because I was just so curious, like how. And it brought me to change management, in organizations and corporations. So that also, when you look at where that comes from, it's very much from that masculine lens, and it's very much from the, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to tell you what's wrong, we're going to get you a good diagnosis, then we're going to put in a full action plan, and then it's like, oh, of course we have to have accountability, and then we'll fix this thing. And you would be amazed at how much money is spent, how much time is spent with projects that actually don't work. Like you come back and a year later and it's like gone, like, oh, there's a new project now for a change. And I was just like, again, I was baffled, like, why do we do this? And so I got to really look at what are the methodologies that we're using? Like when a change sticks, like whether that's in executive coaching or whether that is in a corporation who needs to, change their culture or whatever it is that they want, like what is it that makes the change actually stick? And that led me to a very effective toolkit, which is called Clean Language and Symbolic Modeling, that from there on really started to make self-propelled change possible. So change that comes from within the system, whether that system is one person or whether that system is a larger group of people. And that really, like when I had that, I was like, okay, this works. Like this is like, you can't argue with this in any way, shape, or form. It's a very versatile, flexible, proven toolkit. And I did that for quite a while, bringing that into organizations. But then my health caught up with me. So if you would have asked me at the time, I was like, yeah, I was like a fish in water. I was exactly where I needed to be. I sometimes kind of said to some of my colleagues, like, we're like corporate priestesses. Like I wasn't allowed to say that to our clients, but hey, it was like we were able to put in a container, like have, like in a ritual space, like to create a sacred space where the things that needed to happen could start to happen in a way that was safe, and not meaning that it couldn't get really interesting, or people could get triggered in all sorts of ways, but we would be, it's a way that you can really look after like all the parts of the system and making sure that everything gets to have its place and can be part of like the next evolution of that system. So when my health caught up with me, my immune system had been, it's like a lifelong story, but I've been living with chronic illness for a long time. But about 9 years ago, I actually got to a place where it was very hard to walk up the stairs, like physically. I was just not able to do pretty much anything anymore. And I had to like go of that life, which was really, that was hard. I just kind of having to let go of all the identities that came with it of who I was in the world. But then also, like looking back now, it's also been the greatest gift, because what it forced me to do, I was like, well, I'm, way too young to sit behind like the windowsill and kind of go, watch life go by. So what am I here to do? I just felt like a really big call to serve. And from that place, I started to really feel into, so, okay, what is it that is calling me today? And if I stayed really, really close to that, I was able to do some things. And eventually that showed me that really what I was here to do was also bring my spiritual journey, which had been, kind of walking parallel to like my career and work, bringing me to the priestessing path, and a couple of like really powerful but ancient practices. And I could just kind of see how that all merges together so beautifully and so powerfully. And that really was where soul-based coaching was born. And so really bringing together the tools that you need to create these sacred spaces in a way that does not imply dogma. It doesn't imply a certain spiritual outlook. It's just that what I see happens is that it fits my journey really well, my experiences on my path of the sacred feminine, embodied spirituality. But actually what I see is the way that we're working, it just opens up this space for all of these aspects to become present. So the mind, the body, emotions, but also that soul level and that spiritual level, they just become present. They are just part of everyday life. And so it doesn't really matter if our clients want to talk about that or whether it's relevant for them, or even, what kind of spiritual map they have, because there's just space for all of these parts of them to be part of the unfolding. And what's really interesting is that we see time and time again that the impulse for that unfolding, for that next evolution of who they are, it always comes from the soul and the body. Right? The mind makes up lots of stories. The mind can support, but it's actually not where the impulse comes from. And of course, the heart is a big one too. But yeah, that's where the impulse comes from. And so that is kind of how soul-based coaching came to be. And it's giving me of it's like a depth and connection that I did not find anywhere else prior to bringing all these things together.
Well, it sounds fascinating. It sounds kind of like all of these systems have been a part of the collective consciousness for quite a long time. And then what you did was just kind of identified them in a corporate, environment. And then the universe stepped in, as sometimes it does, and said, here's your basis for shift. And then you probably ended up collecting a bunch of thoughts that had been, kind of in the background throughout the whole period.
Yeah, I think one of those conversations that I remember, like saying, like, we're priestesses, like corporate priestesses. Like I was already tapping into the depth of the work of what is possible at that point. But you can make it much more. You can tap into it in a much more deliberate way. So that's kind of what's been adding over time now. Yeah.
Now, you ended up founding a whole school devoted to these practices, and how do you feel like wasn't that a huge expenditure of time and resources and energy? Do you feel better now?
Yeah, well, yeah, my healing process has continued over the years by staying that close. And I think that I love the coaching that I do with my one-to-one clients. But I also really feel called to teach. And actually people keep asking me about, so, I want to learn this too, teach me. This is why I started teaching again, because I'd been teaching coaches in the corporate setting, actually for quite a few years before I started doing this. But I kind of, I kind of thought that that part of, who I was to be in my work life was kind of over. But then I realized that it really wasn't. And so it's an incredibly nourishing thing for me to be involved in the teaching. And in a way, teaching is one of the things that I love so much in my life, mostly because this work, it happens at that level where if you've been in like ceremony or if you've done ritual, you'll recognize that like there's a layer of presence and a layer of it's like where the mystery lives. Like that is the level that we work with, like all the time. And even when we're teaching, that is the level that we're working with. And that is like such a nourishing, beautiful space to be in, that even after 2 years of like everyone being on Zoom and thinking like, oh no more Zoom, we do all our trainings online, and our sessions are just incredibly nourishing, and they're nothing like most of the Zoom calls that people have all day. So yeah, it feels like I am exactly where I need to be.
Well, it sounds like, you know, from what you're saying, it sounds like a healing journey also for the people who are taking the classes from you, that they get to dive into their own sacred spaces and learn how to amplify almost their connection so that they can then facilitate these sessions for their clients in return.
Yeah, I love that you're picking up on that. I think that is so true. There is like there's a way of, anyone who comes to us has been doing a lot of personal work, right? Whether that is personal development or spiritual development, whether that is like healing training or like therapy training or whatever it is, people come to us and they already know about what it is to dive into their own experience of life in service of their ability to serve. And so what happens in our training is that people have a chance to be, do lots of practice with each other, and to unwrap and unravel lots of layers that are still kind of hanging around, and to come closer and closer and closer to who they're actually wanting to be. And not that is a process that you're ever going to be done with. I don't believe in perfection, and I don't believe in there being ever like one ultimate goal that you'll achieve and then you'll be, successful or worthy or whatever the thing is that our patriarchal ways of thinking have kind of programmed us to think. But there's a real coming into yourself. There's a real sense of coming home to yourself that people get through the program. And so it's to the degree that when we talk to people after they've finished the program, and we ask them about, what do you get and like what impact has it made, just, as part of our process, of our teaching process, and also making sure that we collect these stories. It's hard almost to get them to talk about the coaching that they can now do, because they can, and that is a given, but like they're kind of so full of like all the things that have happened on their personal journey, which is beautiful to witness as well. But I know that they're of course then able to bring that forward and to weave that into how they are showing up in the world.
That was one of the things that I really found so distinct about looking at your soul-based coaching methodologies and looking at your website, is that it's intended for the spiritual side of the coaching realm, because as you and I both know, there are different niches or sub areas that are going to be more heavily focused in this, that, or the other thing. But with yours, it is respectful and entwining of these like primal, almost human needs and spiritual quests that we as healers, the wounded healer, of course, is probably one of the things that you might come across often within your work. But it's also, bowing down to something, that is being more expressed. And I'm sorry, I can't find the words right now, but it's just that more spiritual and nurturing, and we don't have an end goal in mind. We're going to allow for evolution. We are going to honor where you are now, any shifts that you make in your life, any new paths that you discover for yourself, because that's one of the things about coaching and about life too, is just because you set a goal doesn't actually mean that goal eventually will be the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and it's like one of the things that that's bringing up two things for me. One is that let me just make sure that I capture both of them. So I think one of the things that we're doing is that we are really acknowledging that as human beings, we are multifaceted and multi-layered. And so all of these aspects of ourselves, including the spiritual, are part of our human existence. And we're not trying to kind of pretend that, it's like only this layer that matters if you want to, achieve anything in your life. Actually, all of it matters. And what matters most is that all of it works together, and that is beautifully integrated towards what it is that you would like to have more of in your life. And so that is one of the really distinguishing characteristics of the work that we do. And then the other part is that we don't do goal setting as such in soul-based coaching, but we very much work with desired outcomes. And that might feel like a linguistic thingy, but it's actually a very big distinction, because a desired outcome is like a where you would like to get to, or how you would like to be, or where the experience that you would like to have as a result of the coaching. And that can entail like physical goals, but it can be so much more than that. And so what we find is that by stepping into the desired outcomes, what happens is that the goals that people actually achieve are much more multidimensional as well. So it includes very practical goals, like, getting a new job, or opening up to new relationships, or, business success, like growing to the next level of your business, or, changing a pattern in your health, or like sleeping better. Like there's so many very practical things that our clients will see happen in their lives, but that is part of a much wider way of being that has shifted to make these outcomes like the most logical things to have happen in their lives. So it's, in a way, we're working on like a deeper level, where all of the things that need to be aligned and put in place for a specific outcome to actually be organized in that way, so that action taking, and reaching goals becomes something that is a given. It's like, of course that happens. And so we're also not in a business of accountability, because the way that we look at human beings is that when you have an impulse making something happen, like if you have a longing, a desire for something to show up in your life, then you're going to do that. You're going to do the things that are needed for that to happen, unless there are things that are blocking that within you. And so when we look at that, and we look at the kind of the things that are like counter forces for that thing that you would like to call in, when we look at those, we invite them to start integrating into a way so that they can serve that longing and that desire that you want. Right? And sometimes information comes up from these blocks that means that you're shifting how, what that desire is actually about. And so we're helping the whole body, mind, soul system of a client to align itself towards these desired outcomes. And then when everything is aligned, the most logical thing for them to do is to take action in the way that they, towards the goal, the outcomes that they're interested in, and the universe is going to meet them halfway, or sometimes even further. And so, accountability in the sense of like, have you done these things? Like, have you done your homework? Like, that's completely irrelevant, because that impulse to make things happen is part of the package that comes from the client. And there's no need to really kind of be there. It's kind of like a school teacher, to check, have you done your homework? Because it'll happen.
Well, I love that. No, it draws in so many different, concepts that we just kind of put to the side, So like this shared accountability, when it's actually your own accountability, that's all that matters within, the realm of bringing yourself forward. But it's also bringing that alignment into focus, because not only alignment with a goal and aligning these tasks that you
Mm.
need to do to get to that goal. It's really honoring the feeling of, experience, I don't, of achieving these things, and the feeling, because a lot of times we, in the older ways of doing things, we would set goals and we would put blocks in front of ourselves to achieving those goals, because we didn't actually want those things, no matter how much we tried to want them, or it just wasn't the right time for those things. A lot of us have children, and so sometimes we put these lofty goals in place when all we want is just time and energy to be at home, and to have the space for our families, or for each of us it's a little bit different. But I love that too, that you're not pushing for this, did you do your homework, where are you at with this kind of ideology, where it's just like, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if a client tells me that, what they really, really, really want to do to grow their business, for example, is to be more visible, and therefore they want to reach out to people to, like have conversations like this, for example. And we work with that, and we look at like what is that like? What does that look like? And if the person then doesn't take action on that after the session that we do, it means that there is a part of their system that is not on board yet, right? And so yes, I check in with, have you been doing the kinds of things that you thought you wanted to do, but not as a, well, if you didn't, that makes you wrong, or that means you failed some sort of test. No, it's like, oh, that's interesting. So what's going on within their system that means that this is happening? And something else that's really important to mention is that we're not just looking at this from like a mind perspective. So when we're working with people and they want to they have a certain desired outcome, then we're going to also really look at, so what is their internal metaphor landscape for that experience like? And that might sound a little bit strange, but one of the things that our work is founded on is the notion that actually the primary way of making sense of our experience of being alive is through the process of metaphor. So, from a very, very, very early age, like even within the womb, it's like when we experience something, we compare it with things that we've experienced before to just kind of make sense of it and go, is it the same or is it different? And throughout our lives, we've created this map of meaning that is very much, it lives inside of our bodies. And so when sometimes these metaphors, they spill out in our speech. Like earlier, like I said something, I think when I was still in my corporate role, if you would have asked me at the time, I would have told you like I was a fish in water, like I was exactly where I needed to be. So that's one of those metaphors. And there are metaphors like that we've kind of taken on in like collective language that means something like a little bit more universal. But we all have a very unique experience of our own metaphors. And the interesting thing is that when we start to work through the metaphors, then these metaphors come to life and they have the ability to morph and shift. And that is an incredibly magical process to witness. And it means that, just to give you an example, for someone, this is like a client that I worked with years and years ago, but they had this very conflicted feeling about their relationships. They were just coming out of a love relationship, partner relationship. And, there were lots of things that happened, and there was like a whole history of other people and other relationships. And so relationships for this client were like war. And he felt like he was in like a war room and trying to make sense of the situation and see kind of what his next action should be at any given moment. And you can kind of imagine if that is like this is like a subconscious metaphor. Like if that is your experience of relationships in your life, you can kind of see how that is at odds with feeling nourished by relationships, or with relationships being a mutual, like if I were to, I'm just checking in right now, what is my current relationships for my partner relationship with my husband? Like, that feels much more like a dance, like between us and the music of life. And there's like a giving and taking, and there is like there's like a playfulness, and there's like a willingness to explore and try new turns. I have to say, my husband hates dancing, so this is not actually true. We don't actually dance together. But my experience of life with my husband is very much that. And that is a very, 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 very different experience to feeling like you're in a war room, right? And so with that client, I could look at, okay, and so when it feels like you're in a war room, when you think about your relationships, what would you like to have happen? And that is the open way into like birthing a new metaphor, a new embodied metaphor. This is very much about not just in the minds, but also like like your body knows things about metaphors that you don't have any clue about. But once you start to enter in this process, these things are going to go up like, they're just going to come up like bubbles of air, like knowing, very clear knowing of what it's like for you. And that means that the war room could like almost disintegrate, and he could find his own way of wanting to be in relationships and navigating the space that he was in between relationships. And so when the work is at that level, like my ideas as a coach about what relationships should or should not be about, of course I could have said to him all sorts of things about how, how that metaphor, or how the way that he was acting in some of these situations that he was talking about, how they were maybe not helpful. But like none of that was anywhere near as powerful as him actually starting to realize the like the primary structure through which he was acting in his life, and then calling on his own desires and longings and knowings to put in place something very different. And that then gets to be reality. It's like when we've done enough work on the war room and all the parts that make that war room come into being, then the new metaphor starts to be the lens through which the person makes meaning of their lives. And of course, calls in very different experiences for themselves. And so this process, it's hard to explain because it works at a level that people are not familiar with yet. And so this is why we very often have free workshops, masterclasses for people to come and taste what is possible, because it's almost like, it feels a little bit like we're sitting on Aladdin's, what is it, like the cave of the treasures from Aladdin's story. And every single one of us have that treasure cave inside of them, and have the capacity for kind of easeful change. Change that doesn't have to be about struggle or fighting. And it really, it's a very robust process, and it can work with like deep, deeply intense emotional aspects as well. But it has like a lightness and a creativity to it, because it works through the metaphors that make it kind of fun, magical, but at the same time incredibly powerful, and translates itself into very real life results. I'll stop talking now about this for a moment, because I'm like, I can just keep going.
No, I love it. It's fascinating. And it's also, talking about the metaphors and the deep listening, and seeing how people describe or how they hold themselves. A lot of times when you're in a coaching, or I do coaching and card reading as well, but you see a shift in a person's energy when they're talking about something that they're absolutely enamored with, and you almost feel this vibrance, like you just talking about what you were talking about. It's like I could go on and on and on about this. Or you see them shut down and fold in on themselves, and really shy away in some ways from either talking about it, or they talk about it, like you said, in a way that really has this visual and visceral feeling emoted from like a war room or a dance. Is it a war room or is it a ballroom? Really.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's wonderful, because you're taking in deep listening. You're not directing the person. You're giving them their own accountability in shifting, and also allowing them, holding that space for them to just be. Because sometimes even it's sometimes really hard to say, even, on all levels, being a person like who has their own relationships, like a mother, for example, or a wife, husband, or a coach, to give people their own power, and just to hold the space and just let them do their own thing. And you mentioned that you do master classes from time to time. You have one coming up, the Boundary Magic. master.
Yes, we do, and I think it's such a beautiful segue into that, because what you might start to realize is that when we can, that innate capacity that we all have for healing and change, it's our birthright, right? And a lot of coaching modalities and healing modalities actually kind of get in the way of that. They don't mean to. It's just that they most people have not learned how to honor that innate capacity. And so the work that we do, we teach our coaches to really do two things at the same time. One is to stay out of the way, so that we don't accidentally kind of put a spanner in like the wheels, so that this movement cannot continue. The other thing that we teach people to do is to, at the same time, create this really solid riverbed through which that flow of healing and change can happen. And that solid riverbed, it's not a prescription like here's 10 steps and then you get your shift, but it is a learning to meet people where they are in every single moment, and learning to discern where are you going to take their attention next as the coach, so that that riverbed can keep guiding that flow that is happening. And so we often use the metaphor of becoming the midwife to that change, because what that change actually looks like, and even kind of how it unfolds, is not up to us as coaches, but we can be the ones who can make sure that the process can keep continuing in the way that it can have the most impact. And so boundaries in that setting are incredibly vital. When you know how to use boundaries within a session, then what you can do is you can create this magic space for people to tap into their own capacity for transformation. And it does not have to be hard, and it does not have to be difficult. And it's going to most definitely be surprising both to you and the client, to just see how that change comes together in that moment. But the ability to have boundaries and to hold them in this way, and to hold yourself as a coach in this way, that really literally gives space for magic. And so that is what our masterclass is about. It's teaching you how you can have these boundaries in place so that your clients can see that magic happening. And that masterclass is for all coaches, healers, therapists, anyone who serves their client in one-to-one capacity and feels like, yes, I want to bring the depth that I know life has to offer into my work even more, and not get sidetracked by my thoughts, my ideas, my experiences. No matter, when it comes to my coaching, I've been in a coaching role for like almost 25 years now, which is kind of surprising to me, but hey, and I've lived my own life through things like divorce, chronic illness, and involuntary childlessness, like many things, like loads of life experience. And still I see every day with every single client conversation that the things I've learned about life and how to navigate life are not as useful as the things that come from my client's own soul and body wisdom. And this is what I want the world to know about, that there is like a huge untapped resource waiting for us right there. And that can also give people access to their own power and their own connection to life in ways that are like unprecedented for them. And that's what we can give them.
I love that. You just like put it in a nutshell, like this beautiful, a lot of times people call healers, or, get a card reading, or, have a somatic session, for example, and they're leaning into the other person. But that other person has their own paradigm and their own window that they're seeing life through, and their own experiences. And when we shift that back into a person's own inner knowledge, their own experience, their own feelings that nobody else could actually feel for them, it opens up a new level of awareness for our clients, and it allows them to, like you said with that riverbed, if you're going to concrete the riverbed and direct it into this way, instead of allowing it to meander in its own way with its own support and with its own, it's just a totally different structure, in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it does a couple of things, because that the way that the metaphors can shift, it's something that happens on a cellular level. It's something that happens on a neurological level. And so that is like instant embodied change in the moment, and kind of like there's nothing more powerful than that. We can try, but like that's the most powerful thing that people can do for themselves to change their experience of life, and the outcomes and goals and achievements that they would like to see in their lives. There's something else I was going to say, but that's not. So apparently, this was the most important thing. Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, you've stated it so eloquently. And so, why is this paradigm shift necessary? Like, why should we as a society start thinking about self-empowerment, start thinking about things like holding space, start
Yeah.
thinking about things like what our own bodies, or even cellular change? Like, that's giving me goosebumps even talking about it. I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're asking that question. We're all products of thousands of years of patriarchy. And I'm not saying that to go, hey, bash the men. Patriarchy as a system has, done a lot for the evolution of humanity, but we've also lost a lot. And, we see that out there right now, right? We're coming up against the edges of these systems of capitalism, of colonialism, of extraction culture. We're really seeing how it's harming not just our natural world and our societies and communities, but also our physical bodies. And we really, I have no doubt that everyone listening here is like, we've been saying this for years now. It's time for the feminine to return. It's time for the feminine to come back. And again, not about gender, but it's about reclaiming the power, like the birthright that we have to know our own power, to live from the authority from within, in right relationship with our environment, with our relationships, and with our natural world. We've been trying to break down the systems that we see and kind of start thinking about, like, so what else needs to come in place. And we see a lot of new initiatives that are happening that are so hopeful and so beautiful. And I know in like the deepest level of my being that we all hold pieces of solutions within ourselves, within like our our soul, what's the word, like blueprint. But we're not going to get to them using the tools from the old paradigm. So we're not going to, I cannot highlight what's inside of you in terms of parts of solutions for yourself or for your community, or for our world at large. But I can help you get to these pieces of information that are inside of you. Right? It's like the mind has been the primary driver of how we live our lives for a very long time now. And we need to start really living from that other intelligence that we have, right? Our souls have access to that blueprint. They have access to what else is possible. And so whenever I can learn to step aside, whenever I can, you mentioned holding space, Sue, and it's like that is our foundation. And so in our, we have both an 8-week program and a year-long program in our academy. Like even in the year-long program, we actively practice the skill set that comes with holding space all year long. And I've been doing this for 10 years. I still practice every week, because there is a level and a depth of presence that you can bring to people and into sessions that just opens up possibilities. And these are not possibilities for us to think of or to decide on. It's like a part of this work that I love so much is that I can have people coming in with the same question, or like the same kind of like, this is what I long for. But what's going to unfold for them in that session is going to be wildly different. They're going to have completely different metaphor landscapes. The way their system makes sense of the world, the way that they are plugged into their reason for being here, the way that they relate to their lives is going to be so different, and they're going to find their own unique path. And that own unique path, I think that is our key into our better future together, both on an individual level and at a collective level. And so this is why we need to talk about that.
Yes, I love that too, because and it, it goes back to control, and it goes back to, kind of yeah, whoo, all the rules. I'm like, that could just go. I was just like, we could talk for hours about this. It is a new way of interacting with each other. It is a new way of, I think holding space. I just heard that term maybe like 8 to 10 years ago, where before it was give advice or find solutions or, encourage. And all of that comes down to manipulate, control, direct.
Yeah.
Whereas holding space and giving and listening, deep listening, and allowing that person to, like, a lot of times when they're expressing their metaphors, their conversation, their feelings, everything kind of clicks in a moment.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's when you get those deep, profound sense of knowing and authenticity in
Yeah.
truth. And so holding space is this magnificent concept that just allows a person to be and accept them in that moment with all their glorious, sometimes it's ugly crying and,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
coming to terms with, things you've been doing to yourself in the process of living. But wow. And
Mm.
to be reminded of that on a weekly basis. So meeting with other people and learning this way of interacting with others, it can only have a ripple effect in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I look at the people who step into our programs, there is such a big, personal shift, but then also it ripples out into their intimate relationships, with family, with friends, and then in all kinds of work that they do. And this is something else that I really love about this work, is that it weaves so well with, like, what you're saying, like the card readings that you do, or with like physical, like somatic healing modalities. There's like astrology, like there's so many ways in which you can really kind of bring these things together so that we can really help people tap into their own innate capacity for change. And it's like, human beings are made to keep evolving and learning. That's what they're here to do. We keep learning, and we are incredibly intelligent. And I don't say that from an IQ perspective, but from an all levels and all dimensions perspective. And so when we can keep tapping into that ability to learn, to shift, to change, then who knows where we will all end up. I know it's going to be glorious, and it's going to be so aligned with what people are here to do, that it can only serve all of us.
Yes. Because and this would, I'm sure we could talk another time about how, how the trends up until this point in time and how the powers that be kind of disconnected us from all of these potentials and possibilities,
Yeah.
and really kind of limited our potential, kind of evolution in a way. But now that we're exploring things, on a more, I can't think of it, collective consciousness level, of a connected to the earth kind of level, of a like, oh my God, the universe is speaking to me every day in all of these metaphors and symbols and through my body, through my energy. I'm all like, wait, I just got off on a tangent there, but
it's so exciting, right? It's like, it is like, we're not these limited beings like that need to fit into boxes and that have to be like plastic replicas of each other, or like, none of that is actually true. We are actually, we are in full authority, we are in full sovereignty of ourselves, and our capacities as humans is so much bigger than what we've been taught to believe. And I think, it's and what I really enjoy about my work is that it doesn't have to be about, here is the full solution. No, it's about, we are actually evolving into solutions together, and we do that step by step. And this unearthing of like the old paradigms, it's happening in all of our bodies, right? And so this is a really powerful way of helping each other to do that. So I love that we don't have to be perfect and have it all figured out, because that's not going to be part of this story for a long while to come.
hopefully, because I do see, there are two influences right now. There is that cookie cutter, follow the trends, jump on the train, leave your body and become what are they called? Like, not a meme. What are those things called? Avatar. And give up all of the earthy stuff, or connect to the earth, dig in deeper, really grow roots. And, so I see that like kind of, I don't want to say battle, but we'll say dance right now.
Yeah, well, and I think there is, I think it's clear what side of those of the dance that I'm at. There is, I think the only healing that we can have comes through our bodies, right? And our minds and our spirit and our soul and our hearts and our emotions and our feelings, like all of that lives in this magnificent vessel, right, that we have. And so that is the way into beautiful connection and change.
Yes, I love that. I think that's a great place to let this conversation kind of, let people gel with this conversation and let them, think about it further and deeper. So you have this masterclass coming up on February 28th. It's called Boundary Magic. I will put the link in the show notes on YouTube and on our website so that people can sign up for this. Is there a specific time it starts? I don't think I found that information.
I think it starts at 3:30 p.m. Central European time. That's
Okay.
about what it is. There is for those of you who are on the West Coast of the US, there is a recording if you don't want to do the 6:30 a.m. Start of the day. But yes, there is, we have a global community, so we try to have our masterclasses at different times, at time zone, time zone friendly times of day. So yes, hopefully people will be able to join us then. Yeah.
Okay. And just to clarify for the audience as well, is this more geared towards healers and people who do life coaching or coaching as a practice? Or is this pretty much for anybody who wants to learn about holding space, finding magic in their life, putting those boundaries, like you said, in place?
Yeah, so our work is mainly targeted towards people who are coaches, healers, or therapists already, or the people who feel like they want to be. But if you're listening to this and you feel just like, oh, I resonate on that topic, I want to know more about it, you're super welcome to come and join us.
Wonderful, wonderful. And again, thank you so much, Annemiek. It was a pleasure to talk with you. I'm sure we could probably have another conversation just about like this dance of, getting into your body and holding space for other people and seeing how the future is going to lay out. So I really appreciate you taking your time. And again, people can find you at soulbasedcoaching.com. Is that correct?
Academyforsoulbasedcoaching.com is the best place to go. Yeah.
Okay. And I will put that For soul, and I'll put that also in all of the places for you. So
Yeah, great. I love connecting to people as well. So if you're listening and this resonated, let me know. It's always really yummy to hear from you.
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Annemiek. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Sorry about the echo. I will have all of the replays available on YouTube, on Spiritual Business Spotlight, and on our events page. We do have a link for the Boundary Magic Masterclass. So thank you all and have a wonderful day. Thank you, Annemiek.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.